Fala galera, today I'm going to make the English profile about the Libromancer deck that I played in the Nationals, Brazilian Nationals this past weekend, and also played this deck on Hartford a couple weeks ago. And me and Michelle, we came up with this deck. We work on this together. So first, I want to thank him for all the work that we did together on this. He also topped the Brazilian Nationals. He topped 32, so it worked for both of us. I ended on top four and I almost topped Hartford. I lost in the end. I ended 8-3 in the end and 6-3 because of the buys. But still, it was one win away of topping. There was some changes between both events, more meta call changes than um, like changes on the structure of the deck. I feel like the structure of the deck is really similar in both events. It's more a meta call change, like changing tags and changing side deck cards and all that. And I will talk a little bit about the the deck itself, right? Like um, why I think it's decent, and I feel like I don't know if it's the best deck. I feel like is a really interesting thing to do. Like we working on this deck because it's a really uncommon thing to have in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is we don't have anything to look at. We didn't have anything to look at because this deck is a TCG exclusive. So it's not like let's say you play Despia, right? Best is about to be released, and then you can look at the OCG results or Phantom Knights or almost every single deck in Yu-Gi-Oh. This is different. This is TCG exclusive. So we needed to come up with everything, like the ratios, the deck, the card, the approach, the side deck, the extra deck, the combos, everything. So I'm really glad that we could too came up with all that and that be to be good, which is really rare to do, and I'm really proud of both of us. So about the deck, like I feel like it's an interesting deck. It does some things really well. I feel like the main goal of this deck is to side lock your opponent. This is going first, of course. Uh, and I will go ahead and say that the biggest selling point for me for this deck is that yes, you can side lock. I know that many other decks also can side lock. Most of the decks do side lock through fiber with Dagda, and you go Wonder Magician and kill the site and do side lock, and then you can even make a Baroness after, right? And we can do that as well. This is a possibility here. But the biggest difference is that this is not our plan A. This is the plan B of the deck. This is not what we do. This is what we do if something goes wrong. Our actual combo is much better than that because it's stronger to hand traps, it's stronger against Nib because you make Baroness before 5th summon, and it is resilient to many cards that are good against sight. So usually the end board that you try to go for are Dumbruka with the trap, which is a negate, the Baroness itself, and Dagda, which was used to get the site. Usually you can get site other ways too because you can search directly from maintain, but like most of the time is that's the board. What you need to do is to kill the site with the Baroness on your own turn, and then you can reborn the site in standby phase with the Barons. So, and then because of that, you have the negation of the intervention. So, what are the differences here? One, you have intervention as a negation, which is really important since it can negate some popular cards like droplets. It's really unlikely that your opponents are going to discard a trap with droplets. So most of the time, overwhelmingly chunk of the time, you're going to negate the droplets with this. So that's good. Another thing, I guess that's specifically what happens when you go. I will always compare to the regular side combo, okay, which is fiber going for one magician. I guess that's it for example, or many other decks, but specifically Despia, they can do first action fusion. and that way you can do the lock before, because you can do Hawk-Brax on standby phase or something, right? So they have the option to go first action, try to fuse, and then it's weird because there is no time for you to do the site lock before mirror hits the field, so that sucks. So that's a big problem, and there's other things too, like in perm on standby phase or draw phase, droplets in perm. So, like there's so many issues with this combo. Like this being the plan A is not ideal at all. In comparison, the Baron trying to reborn the site way is much better, because one, when you use the Baron and try to get the site, some of the cards are really popular and try to prevent the site to come in are Crow, Call the Grave, Bell, cards like that, Shark Cannon. And what is really interesting is that you can use that Baron to negate those cards, and this Baron is about to leave, so you get an extra negation because that's the last opportunity that they have to use this effect. So you use the Baron negation before using the intervention negation, so you got another interaction there to negate the way to avoid the site. And again, you still have the intervention, so many times they have to have 3 cards, which is pretty much impossible. So this combo is really strong into interactions. So is also really good into nib, because you make Baron's 4th or 5th summon, depends on the hand, but most of the time, not most of the time, all the time, when you go for the Baron line, like I said before, it is under nib. So that's also a really big selling point of this. And again, if something goes wrong, you can go for side. So let's say you go like Diviner and then negate, so you can't do Baron line because now your Diviner is level 2 because you got negate, but you still can special summon any Yu-Gi-Oh card. You can use the Diviner and whatever and make Fiber and go for Jet and go for Dagda. So what happens a lot, this deck is really good going first, and this works, like the side combo really works going first, and is also resilient to hand traps. Another thing that I feel like is good against for this deck is the consistency is good. I think I feel like we max on the consistency possibilities here. Everything is free off, as you guys can see, even terraforming this version, and that's pretty good. Like it can happen. This is a 2-card combo, right? You need combinations of 2, and usually those 2 are really strong. Like it's full combo usually, and you do the site and you win, right? What else? Oh, the redundancy that sometimes you have is not that bad, because this deck is also really hard to stop. Like cards like Ash and Perm, Veiler, like those type of negations, they are decent against this deck. Like using effects, those negates effects, it's not bad, but like it's really hard for your opponent to know when to use hand trap against you, because sometimes you have redundancy. For example, you have Geek Boy and Special Geek Boy and say effect. It's really hard for your opponent to not negate, but it can be easily punished by you having an appearance, or you pot into appearance, or terraform into appearance. Like there's so many ways for you to punish. Or for example, you start fire like fire first action effect. How can your opponents not negate that? They have to, otherwise you get geek, and the geek effect, they're going to negate that then? Like they wait, so but you get an extra body, it's weird. So no, okay, they wait. So you get the field, and the field get a card, and then you ritual summon, and like it starts to snowball. So they often need to negate the first thing, but when time doesn't work, let's say sometimes you open fire and geek, so you go fire effect, and they hand trap you rather than to hand trap you wasting a card on redundancy. So the redundancy is not bad in here, and you can do things like that with pots to punish hand traps. So that's why this deck doesn't have like things like brave cards, or because it also conflicts with Diviner, which is by far the best cards in this deck. But also Call by the Grave and things like that, because the redundancy many times, the consistency. What happens sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh? Okay, let me put it like this. What happens sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh that many times in Yu-Gi-Oh redundancy is bad. Like, example, If you open two Mois, oh, sword two is bad. If you open Longuian, two Longuians is bad. Like I'm giving like a example of redundancy that's being bad. It's not the case here. The redundancy many times here, it's acceptable, even wanted, because you want, if you open redundancy into cards, they need to negate because they're forced to negate early, otherwise it snowballs, and then you punish. So you rather get hand trapped many times. Of course, there's sometimes that your hand is like three hand traps and you only plays two cards and then you get hand trapped and kinda sucks. And it also depends because let's say your hand is like fire, bentang, ash, mourner, okay? And you go fire effect and negate, you summon mourner and you go fire line. And that happens a lot. This type of situation. And that's my next thing. Like the hand trap lineup. We play Ash, Ogre, which is a teleport, targets because of the fiber, Mourner, and Veiler. All of those hand traps and impar. Like, especially Mourner and Veiler, Ash, I feel like it's a no-brainer. Ogre is because of teleport too, but like, especially Mourner, you lean more for hand traps that are turners because, again, fiber being playing B is super relevant. It happens all the time. The cards being turners are extremely important. Every time we try to change, like let's say Mourner for something that is not a turner, like a draw or crow or a droplets or whatever, like it matters. It definitely matters. Being a defense and being a turner, it's really interesting for this. You get extra value of the card. And this happens a lot. You summon this all the time, not only to punish and traps and go fiber line if you got stopped, but also to kill your opponents in some situations. When you top deck, for example, a hand trap, you can do that and you go like fiber, when you go second, to kill. Like you can go fiber into Veiler, into excess gold, for example, for Celine. So that's a really interesting interaction as well. And the only thing that I wanted in this deck, surprise, more hand traps. This is not a bad number, 13 and 45. This is more than many of the other decks that we have in the metagame. And I still true to the belief that in this metagame right now, you need hand traps. I wanted this to be more, and I did play more in Hartford. In Hartford, I played one last hour farming and 3 Nibiru. So I played 1647, which percentage wise is more hand traps. I play more cards, but I play more hand traps as well. So the probabilities of hand traps are higher in the Hartford deck than in my national deck. I don't think that was the reason that I didn't top Hartford. I feel like there were other reasons. It wasn't that. But for nationals in Brazil, we cut the Nibiru because there's a lot of rogue. I play like 10 different decks in 10 rounds of Swiss, for example. So I feel like I played Despia twice, and then I play 8 different decks. So it was super diverse. So we tried to play something more. I would like to say standard, but there is no standard. This is the first time this is happening. So standard for us, for me and Michelle, something more safe, like without any beer risk that I took in Hartford that I didn't. I don't know if I regret it. I don't think so. So that's something that I would have tried to improve. Play more hand traps. It's absolutely mandatory that you open no engine cards going second in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. Every single deck FTKs you. This is the thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! For many years now. And I don't think it's changed now. Like, you can try to go some approach of going second. Sometimes your engine is really good going second, like let's say Sword 2, and then you're not that pressure to play and trap that I feel like still do, but even though your engine is better, going second, one of the best engines going second, like engine wise. But I feel like if you let your opponent completely play, it doesn't matter how good your engine is, you're probably going to lose a big chunk of the time. Of course, some decks more, some decks less, but often enough that is not good for you to give up on hand traps. I feel like you need to do. So what I wanted is to play more hand traps. Well, I don't know how yet. Another thing that I need to make it clear is that we are working on this deck, I don't know, for 20 days or something, because there was a ban list, and then this was after the ban list, before Hartford. So there was like 10 days for Hartford, and then more 1 week for my national. It's even less than 20 days. So it's not a lot of time. And being able to came up with something that is competitive against well-established decks that have many more hours and many more minds thinking about this is really good. So yeah, that's the only thing that I have with this deck. Again, I feel like this is not a bad number, 1345. It improves full side because usually gammas go in without many of the hand traps going out, so you have like 1645 many times, and that's fine. And like fine for Paulo standards of hand trap percentages, okay? But yeah, that's it. What else? Let me see. I mean, I'm not going to go into combos or whatever. Like, this is not what I want to do here. I want to talk about more about the overall of the cards. Divine is insane. This deck, like I said before, is a turner and is a searcher for the rituals, and it's also the level modulation is really important because of the whole Baroness situation. You do this with fire a lot into Barons. Teleport is absolutely insane in this deck because it's a special summon Geek Boy that get the field spell without demanding you to have a ritual in hand. I feel like you have a lot of Libromancers because you have all those Libromancer cards. You have 13 Libromancers, but you also have a lot of rituals, which is the 5 rituals that you do play, and then you have the diviners and the preparations, and like pot is pretty much any of those. It's really unlikely that you pot into nothing. You probably pot into something that you want, because since the combos are like you need a Libromancer and you need a ritual. It doesn't need to be specifically one of the Libromancers, specifically one of the rituals. Of course, some of the combos are better if you open with specifics of one of them. That's true, but it's not like mandatory. You always do something interesting, and you pretty much almost always can find side combos somewhere, even if you're forced to normal summon hand trap and go for fiber. I do like the agent. I feel like it gives a lot to this deck, especially going first and in some grind matchups, whatever that means. So I feel like agent is interesting too. Illusions is really good in this deck because special summons is a ritual. Souls has synergy because you can send the appearance to grave, so you get an extra card in the process. Yeah. What else? Jet is important because of the fiber combo. I already talked about sight. Bentang is really good. You can search the diviner usually, another Bentang, which sometimes happens, or the site itself, which also sometimes happens. And that's it. I'm not going to go into a lot of details of how the deck plays out. I'm going to just say overall about the deck. I feel like this deck is really interesting. I feel like it's, my opinion, is definitely up there. For sure. We came to the conclusion was the best option. Wow, okay, why we play this deck, right? We want to avoid getting floodgate by the common floodgates of the metagame. Barrier, for example. This deck is not hit by barrier, even though people side barrier against this. The barrier is awful against this. Because people see, oh, ritual deck and they side barrier, but it's not that great. Sometimes it can hurt, but like most of the time it's not that great. And they can say synchro too, but like then you can play as a ritual, so it's not weak to barrier. It's not weak to token collector, which is another really common card. So not being weak to barrier for me is a big selling point, okay? Because it was a really annoying card. Sword Soul is a really strong deck. I feel like many people believe it is one of the best, if not the best deck right now. And it's true, but when it goes poolside, it gets much worse. Much worse. And that's annoying. And there's not much you can do about the problems that, like the no engine that get hit, like token collector barrier and things like that. So there's not much you can do. You just like accept the fact that you're going to lose games to cards. And this deck also can lose games to card, but not as often and not as hard as Sword Soul Adespe do. because they are more the target of the metagame, not this. Okay, so yeah, that was the reason that I was trying to play something different than Sword and that's which was for the big chunk of the community, the best two decks going hard for it, right? Like now you have more another decks like Punk Fury or Punk Brave or ABC Fury and Brave. Like you have all the decks like making splash in the metagame. Like people are considering maybe some of those one of the best, but at the point it wasn't the case. Okay, yeah, side deck. We have the barriers and we have the deck building ones. Deck building ones is really good in this deck. It's a floodgate. It's really good in first, but also everything is different things. Like this is psychic, this is cyverse, this is fairy, and the turners are all different things, and everything the extra deck is different. Like it's you pretty much like this is thing. So you pretty much play differently, like with all different types all the time. So this is almost never matters for you, but it does matter for a lot of people. For example, Sword. So it does matter against Flunder too, which is an important deck in the metagame. So that was the reason that we decided to play deck and be only one. It was a really good decision. I won some games with this card alone. And one of the things that's really important to note, both sides, people tend to go overboard to try to avoid to get inside, which is true. It makes sense. Getting inside sucks. But what happens is that in some matchups you can side both barrier and there can be one, and sometimes you can side one or the other. The thing is, when that happens, you don't need to go for side. You go for full negate board, which can happen. Like you have Baroness, you have this, you can summon Herald of Arclight in this deck, which is specifically better because you can search a ritual after you negate something. So you have a follow-up. What I mean by this is that, for example, against the Ignicia that I played in top 32 in the Nationals, I got hand trapped twice and I end on one negate that can be only one. Like I end on Doombruker that can be only one. My opponent tried to play a floodgate and I won. That also happened, for example, against the Desperate that I played like in Swiss. I don't remember the round. My opponent hand trapped me like once or twice, but I end on like Baroness Barrier with follow-up. So you don't need to go for side, and it's less likely that you even reach the side because there is more likelihood that your opponent have hand traps both sides. So you having cards like that, you can punish the hand traps. It's better for you to try to deal with the hand traps with things like that than trying to directly deal with the hand traps with something like Call by the Grave, right? So that was the idea here, and I feel like it worked really well. What else? Like Gamma, I feel like I don't need to talk a lot about Gammas. I feel like we side this in every single matchup. Going second, besides I don't know, Elvish or something. And then in these nationals, we decided to play a lot of back row removal because it was Brazilian national. There's a lot of rogue deck, and I feel like it was fine. And yeah, I feel like it was okay. I didn't play against a lot of trap decks in this national, so it didn't matter a lot to me. But I feel like it did for Michelle. So yeah, one of these decks concerns is not that big of concern. It's annoying, but it's Mystic Mine, especially game one. There is not a lot of Mystic Mine game one decks right now, which is better. But there are some decks that side in Mystic Mine, which is annoying. So this is something that might be something that I will try to work on to not lose. For example, I lost in top 4 to a Tribegate Littlest that's sided. I don't know if he main, but at least he had it. Mystic Mine in a really, I was in a really good position, but I don't know if he top deck or he already had, but it doesn't matter. Like he used Mystic Mine and I insta lose the game because I knew he played mine, but I couldn't side back removal into mine into birds. So you just need to risk they don't have it. Long term is the best call than side cyclones, for example. So ideally, the ideal scenario would be having something that is good into the combo decks going first, but also deal with mine. That's the ideal scenario, and that's something that I will try to work on from now on. But like, this is something that I want to address because mine is annoying. In the Hartford, I lost some games to mine, but I won the matches against the mine decks, but I lost some games to it. And like games like that was super. For example, I lost a game to Mac Knight game one, I full combo. I didn't know it was Mech Knight full mine deck. Like it wasn't like they tack one mine. It was like 3 mines, terraforming, side rotation, everything. Demise of the land. It was that type of deck, right? So that happened game one. Again, I don't think that's super popular. I don't think you can go overboard like and make your deck much worse just because the possibility of getting mine. And I feel like it really depends on how popular it is in your area or whatever you're going to play. But for example, in nationals, we decide to not main any main deck out to mine, and we didn't. Even though we thought about it, we think about it like maining cyclones or feather, whatever, right? Just to have an out game one, but I feel like it's not worth it. I feel like you're going to lose more games because you draw a feather randomly, then this feather is going to save you into a mine situation. Because even if you do draw this feather, doesn't mean you're going to win, or the cyclone or whatever, right? Because it can take a long time. Sometimes you're going to get mine with 30 cards in your deck, and you have like 1-2 cyclones there, and then like it is not the greatest odds still. The problem is not this. The problem is the card itself. Okay, this is a whole different discussion, but like yeah, sure. The problem is the mine being combo decks, right? So yeah, it's not about having an out. So yeah, that's something to address. I feel like both sides is where you can respect it a little more, but game one is really difficult. I feel like long term it doesn't work. So yeah, what else? Extra deck, I feel like we like all 14 cards in the extra deck besides the last one, which is this Black Rose. And in Hardford, I played Tatsunoko in this spot. Tatsunoko is really interesting because against Sword Soul specifically, which was a deck that I was respecting more for Hardford, which was true, it was a popular deck. Tatsunoko is interesting because you can normal summon the Diviner, and specifically against Sword Soul, it's more likely that this Diviner doesn't resolve because it's more likely that they have negations, because out of the decks, the metagames are the ones that use negations more often, but also because they have Shishao really often, even when they get hand trapped. And so why I say all this? Because Diviner is negated a lot, which means it's level 2. When that happens, if you have any way to reach Illusion, you have some, right? You have the illusion itself, you have the preps, and you have the pots. If you reach the illusion, you can go illusion effect, get souls, and don't shuffle the illusion back. You shuffle something else back, and then you summon the magician souls, and you make Tatsunoko. And then you use the illusions in hand that you kept and the Tatsunoko to make Baroness like that. And that's really good. The problem is that doesn't happen too often. And I feel like anything in this last spot doesn't happen too often. I feel like all those other 14 cards are really important, but the last spot was still thinking. We don't know. We don't know. Black Rose is also something that can come up because you can Diviner and send the Herald and get Illusion and summon souls. Then you have 6+1, which is Black Rose, which is more important against more open decks. For example, like a Despia, they tend to set Super Poly and send things like that. And many times they don't use Super Poly on a random Magician Souls. They wait more, especially for Dumbruka, which is dark. So you can punish them by Black Rose them. There's other applications, but it's more or less like that. We're still thinking. I don't know. Okay, I don't have an answer for that yet. I'm still thinking about possibilities there. Everything else, like I feel like all of those are really important and obvious, I would say. Linkaribo is necessary for that synchro combo. So you have the spec to kill. I feel like Dark and Hita are extremely important. Hita is really good into Sword Soul, for example, because they have a lot of fires, but other decks have some fires in grave. Ash is a thing that's almost always in graves. Dark, it's necessary against Despia, because against Despia you can't grind. Despia is impossible. You need to kill them, and Dark helps on that, especially getting Mirror Jades from grave, because sometimes you kill the Mirror Jade and they trigger and they're going to regek you, and there is no way you sight lock them. Sometimes you just need to kill them. So Dark can reborn the Mirror Jade and can make access code using Dark and something else, and then you win like that. So those are really important. Cross Ship is really interesting in this deck because you can do the draw 2 card situation effects, right? More than once, one on your turn and one your opponent's turn. So that's really interesting. And also Lingurible is good because fire is Cyvers, so you can randomly make a Lingurible and play into some traps. That happens a lot because people just forgot this is a possibility. And also you can turn your Libromancer fire into a dark monster into a dark charmer, which is relevant in many situations because they have like weird attributes, because one is fire, one is wind. So yeah, that's it. The whole idea of this deck is to try to stay away from the spotlight that the other decks have and the cards that they have in common that hit them really hard, especially Barrier. I feel like Barrier is by far the most annoying card because there's nothing you can do. I won a lot of games using Barrier and there was nothing my opponents could have done. And this is something that I would like to prevent myself, to put myself in that type of situation. And yeah, I really like it. I feel like it's well positioned. It was well positioned. I don't know how it's going to be looking going forward. And I'm really proud of me and Michelle for came up with such a cool deck in a search short notice, and with cards and nothing to look at. We need to come up with everything. Okay, so I hope you guys like it, and that's it. So see you guys later, and bye.